Welcome, everyone, to another edition of White Horse Live. Tonight is our 69th episode, coming to you live from White Horse Black Mountain, hosted as always by Bob Hinkle and co-produced by White Horse Black Mountain and Rad House Studio. Tonight, we are pleased to bring back AmiciMusic and Dr. Daniel Weiser. Tonight, he's joined by violinist Tim Schwarz. And we're so pleased to have a live audience again for these shows. All of us here at White Horse and Rad House Studio, thank you for viewing White Horse Live during the past year. You've been just about the only income we've been able to generate during the ongoing COVID restrictions. You have kept White Horse from going out of business, and for that, we are indeed grateful. Artists are still faced with fewer and smaller audiences than before COVID. They, too, are grateful for your ticket purchases and for any additional love you might be willing to share by way of our virtual tip jar. During the show, you can visit whitehorselive.tips in your web browser, not .com, not tips.com, just whitehorselive.tips. We will display that address from time to time during the show for our online audiences, and for you here in the live audience, you can visit that address from your phone and do the same thing if you feel like it. Thank you for helping make this series a success. Please help us spread the word, share the event notices, and tell all your friends. Now here's your host, Bob Hinkle.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to White Horse Live. Now, we usually have a little theme song we do at the beginning. It's not classical. It's only chamber in that I'm in a chamber while I'm singing it, but otherwise, it's another genre entirely. So just think of us as a variety show. When the song rises up, white horses will fill the mountains. When the song rises up, then the clouds roll away. If you don't believe that music has power, just stay right here with us for just about an hour. Well, Tim and Dan, they're gonna lift you up. They will loosen up your tightening and fill your cup when the song rises up. White horses will fill the mountains when the song rises up. Then the clouds roll away, then the clouds roll away, then the clouds, they're gonna roll away. All right. Thank you. All right, now we're officially in session. Dr. Daniel Weiser has played at White Horse literally hundreds of times. Every time I think about it, I feel older. In the last 11 years or so, AmiciMusic has been a wonderful part of our musical menu. I'll never forget the first show we did. We called it Divas and Drafts. It's two wonderful opera singers. One of whom was Kimberly Hughes, my ex-wife and co-founder of White Horse. At the beginning of the show, I noticed an older gentleman sitting at the bar in his bib overalls, his work shirt, and his boots. I wondered what he was doing here and didn't think he was going to necessarily like the show. But afterward, he approached me and he said, "You know, I didn't think I liked classical music, but sit me at the bar, put a beer in my hand, and let those lovely ladies sing like that, I think I like it all right." And I knew we were on the right track. Dr. Weiser has played all over the world. He's at Carnegie Hall and the National Gallery in Washington, D.C., and he's got more wonderful credits than I have time to read, although for a price, Daniel, I'll read them all slowly. For the next 3 nights here at White Horse, if you don't like Beethoven, boy, are you in the wrong place, because we're going to get a good dose of Ludwig's music as well as some stories of his life. All this in an open bar. So, without further ado, here's the man of the hour, the man of few words, Dr. Daniel Weiser.
Woo! Thank you. Thanks so much to Bob and everybody here at White Horse, and of course with Rebecca and the Rad House Studios, who have put together this incredible live stream ability, so you can watch this from anywhere. Hopefully you are already, but it's so great to have some people in the audience. It's been a while since we've had audience members during this pandemic, so thank you for coming out. And we're really excited to be able to push the White Horse shows over the 70 mark over the next couple days. We'll be here tonight, and then tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock and Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock. 3 different shows as we explore all, or mostly all, of Beethoven's works for violin and piano. My partner in crime for this adventure is a great colleague and friend. We go way back to our days at Peabody Conservatory in Baltimore, where we each graduated, and we were fortunate. We teamed up to become the American Artistic Ambassadors abroad. In 1996, the U.S. State Department at the time had a wonderful program where they sent classical artists around the world, and we got to go to 11 countries in the Middle East and Southeast Asia, places like Tunisia, Pakistan, Egypt, Syria. We played in Aleppo, Syria, which was a beautiful place way back when. It seems like most of the places we visited had revolutions a few years later. I don't know if there's a connection, but it was a fascinating trip. We were also in Thailand and Laos and Sri Lanka, really just showing that America had good music. And so Tim and I have maintained our friendship over 20-something years, and he loves to come to Asheville, so he's going to join me here. And tonight, we're going to begin Beethoven's works with three of his sonatas. We're going to do number 1, number 4, and number 5. We're going to skip number 2 and number 3, only because we just can't fit them all in. They're all great pieces, but he did 1, 2, and 3 all at the same time, so we figured it would be good to give you 1 and then jump ahead a couple years to 4 and 5. Beethoven, of course, really the greatest composer, but one who really understood that he was great, even when everybody around him was not thinking he was all that great in the beginning. Born in 1770 in Bonn, Germany, but by 1792 he had made his way to Vienna. Hopefully, he was hoping to actually study with Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, but Mozart dies a couple months before Beethoven arrives in Vienna. So he ends up studying with Franz Joseph Haydn, then probably the next greatest composer. But Haydn was in his 60s at the time, and they did not really get along. Haydn wanted Beethoven to write in the more classical, charming style with elegance and taste, and Beethoven had none of that. He had his own ideas of where music was going to go. He was really pushing us into what we call that romantic era of music that really starts right around this time as Beethoven leads the way. What Beethoven was great at, though, was playing the piano. And when he came to Vienna, he astounded audiences with his piano playing. He played the piano like nobody really had played it before. In previous players like Mozart and Haydn all played really from their wrist, really just moving their fingers, and it was a light kind of sound. For Beethoven, it was a full-body experience. He put his whole back, his whole body into that performance, and because of that, he ended up destroying most of the pianos that he actually played on. They were not made for what Beethoven was doing to them, and really it's because of Beethoven that the modern piano was slowly developed, as piano makers wanted to make a piano that Beethoven could not destroy. But literally, he left a graveyard of pianos behind. There's a wonderful story by Anton Reicha, a good friend of Beethoven, who was turning pages for him at one concert, and he said the following. During the evening, I was mostly occupied in wrenching the strings of the piano which had snapped, while the hammers stuck among the broken strings. Beethoven insisted on finishing the work, and so back and forth I leaped, jerking out a string, disentangling a hammer, turning a page. I think I worked harder than Beethoven. So he really did mangle the piano in a way that nobody had, but he also could play these slow movements in such an expressive way that he left everybody crying in the audience. He just moved people in a way that they had not been moved before. Now, he was a difficult man. In fact, I can't imagine being his teacher, being his student. He said to one student of his, "You are going to have to practice long and faithfully before you realize that you cannot play the piano." And he was also a difficult student unto himself. Of course, he and Haydn broke up after about 6 months, and he went out on his own. He said, "I don't need Haydn anymore. I'm going to be king of Vienna." He ended up working for a little while with a guy named Albrechtsberger, who famously said, "This young Beethoven never has learned anything and never will learn anything. As a composer, he is completely hopeless." Not true. But Beethoven also knew that he was better than most of the nobility around him. And in fact, at one party, when a friend said, "I am glad that you know the proper etiquette in the presence of the nobility," he apparently said, "You ought to be glad that the nobility knows the proper etiquette in the presence of genius." So this was a man who was sure of himself. And you hear that in this first sonata. It's very confident writing, written in 1798. And Beethoven was following in this the example of Mozart, who wrote 42 different sonatas for violin and piano. But in most of Mozart's sonatas, the main instrument is actually not the violin, it's the piano. It's really a piano sonata with a little violin on the side, just adding some high notes. Beethoven began to make the effort to sort of make the sonata more equal, actually. In this first piece, you hear the beginning, they play unison, scales and arpeggios, and ultimately, as we get later in Beethoven, the violin's going to be even more dominant than the piano. The piano is still dominant in this first one, because that's what Beethoven was playing, and he certainly enjoyed playing it. Beethoven actually could play the violin as well. He took lessons in Bonn, and when he got to Vienna, he took lessons with a very famous violinist named Ignaz Schuppanzig, who was the best violinist in Vienna. So Beethoven knew the instrument well and wrote for it very, very well. So this piece, we say, is written in 1798. Now, Beethoven we think of as this kind of old, disheveled guy romping through the streets and sort of lost in his thoughts. But when he was a young man, he wasn't a great-looking man, but he was sort of a dandy. He had good outfits. He supposedly learned how to dance, although he was quite bad at it. He bought a horse. He had a powdered wig. And as one biographer said, in the 1790s, this young Beethoven was a giant, exulting in his strength and his success, and his youthful confidence gave him a buoyancy that was both attractive and infectious. So he was really taking Vienna by storm, playing at all sorts of parties. This piece was actually premiered at a benefit for a singer named Josefa Duszek, and then was ultimately dedicated to Antonio Salieri, who Beethoven also studied with. That name might be familiar. Salieri is supposedly the guy who poisoned Mozart. That's not a true story, but that was in the movie Amadeus. But Salieri was probably the next greatest composer in Vienna at the time, so Beethoven sort of politically dedicated this to Salieri. The reviews of these first sonatas were a little confused. They actually recognized that there was some greatness in here, but as one reviewer said, the three violin sonatas of Opus 12 are overladen with difficulties. Herr Beethoven goes at his own gait, but what a bizarre and singular gait it is. To be accurate, there is only a mass of learning here without good method, obstinacy which fails to interest us, a striving after strange modulations, a heaping up of difficulties upon difficulties until one loses all patience or enjoyment. However, this critic, after he has tried more and more to accustom himself to Herr Beethoven's manner, has learned to admire him more than he did at first. So they did recognize the greatness in it. To our ears, this does not sound really crazy, but again, coming from Beethoven and Haydn, he was already sort of pushing the boundaries a little bit. In this first sonata, we have three movements, this wonderful first movement, great dialogues between the instrument, theme and variations in the second movement, and a fun rondo in the third movement with lots of great joy and buoyancy. Hope you enjoy Sonata Opus 12, number 1 in D major. Thank you. So that is the first of 10 sonatas that ultimately Beethoven would write for violin and piano. Again, a great introduction of himself into that world. And he would follow up soon afterwards, a couple of years later, with two more, which were actually supposed to be written at the published at the same time. He had actually told the engraver that the number 4 that we're going to play, Opus 23, and number 5, the famous Spring Sonata, which will be our last one tonight, were supposed to be all part of the same group. He actually thought of them as contrasting examples. One in the minor key of A minor, very austere and Bach-like and counterpoint. With the second one, the F major, much more pastoral and bucolic. And often Beethoven wrote things with this in mind. In fact, the Fifth Symphony and the Sixth Symphony are very similar. He saw them as two sides. The Fifth Symphony, the Fate Symphony, dark and forward progress. The Sixth Symphony, the pastoral, again, a kind of spring-like feeling where everything pulls back. And he saw that as two sides of the same thing. Now, apparently, the engraver screwed up, and when he first printed them, one was printed like upright like that, and one was printed like that, which makes it difficult to put them together in one volume. So we ended up having to separate them as Opus 23 and Opus 24. But you really want to hear these two sonatas as two sides of the same coin. Beethoven, during this period in the late 1790s, 1800s, was living with Prince Lichnowsky, who was a sort of enlightened prince who recognized the greatness of Beethoven and supposedly said to his servants, if Beethoven rings for help at the same time as I do, you need to go to Beethoven first. So he understood the greatness of Beethoven, and Beethoven in return would often play at the parties that Lichnowsky would have and would be sort of the spectacle at his house. He threw many of these parties. But there was one famous party, supposedly when French soldiers, remember this was at the time of the Napoleonic Wars, and the soldiers were moving in and at times were taking over Vienna. Lichnowsky was hosting the soldiers, and even though Beethoven sort of admired what Napoleon was doing in many ways, he ultimately sort of turned against the way that he sort of took over large swaths of Europe. He didn't want to play for these soldiers, and so he apparently left this party, and Lichnowsky sent him a letter saying, I was really hoping you'd play at the party. And he wrote back one of his famous responses. He said, Dear Prince Lichnowsky, what you are by accident of birth. What I am by myself. There are and will be 1,000 princes. There is only one Beethoven. Yes, so he knew that he was pretty good at an early age, and one of my other favorite quotes he said at this time, he said, music is the wine which inspires one to new generative processes. And I am Bacchus, who presses out this glorious wine for mankind and makes them spiritually drunken. So he really had a good sense of himself. One might call him a little arrogant, but because he was such a good pianist, at the time there were several of these other great pianists who would come to Vienna and challenge him to a piano duel, sort of like a sing-off like we have now, where these two pianists would sort of play at dueling pianos, try to improvise and outdo each other. And there was a very famous one that took place shortly before he wrote the Fourth Sonata, which he actually was written for the Count Moritz von Fries, and Moritz von Fries hosted many of these parties, and it was at his house that a very famous pianist from Paris named Daniel Steibelt came and challenged Beethoven, and Steibelt came up first, and he played. He took a tune that he knew that Beethoven had written, and he started doing improvisations on it. Now, you're not supposed to really do that if you're fighting against Beethoven. Beethoven was really annoyed that he was messing around with his tunes. So supposedly, Beethoven got up and took the cello part from a piece that Steibelt had written that was there, turned it upside down on the piano, and began to do these crazy improvisations on that, so that Steibelt actually had to run out of the room. Everybody was laughing so hard, and Steibelt said he would never again be seen in person with Beethoven. He was so humiliated. So Beethoven knew how to keep people in their places. And Moritz von Fries was a very cultured sort of guy. He had actually spent time in Paris. His paintings had been done by very famous painters, and he loved Beethoven. They were about the same age. He had a house at the Josefplatz there in Vienna, which had a very beautiful theater, and that's where many of these pieces were premiered. And in fact, several symphonies, including the Seventh Symphony, was dedicated to him. We're going to now go to this Fourth Sonata, and this is one that's not often played, although to me it's one of his best works. It's in a minor key, A minor. It has a sort of austere feeling. It's not as virtuosic, but it really shows an incredible understanding of how the instruments relate to each other. Restless, very much, you can see that Beethoven was studying Bach in making this piece. There's a wonderful second movement that I think really captures silence. Beethoven loved silence, the rests between the notes. He often said sometimes there's more music in a rest than there is in a note, and you'll hear that in the second movement. And then there's a very fast as well, a third movement. So here's the sonata in A minor, Opus 23. Thank you. Kind of a surprising end. You don't expect it to fade off into the sunset like that, but a lot of fun things that Beethoven was really exploring in that sonata. Hopefully you heard the interplay and the jokes that was sometimes happening, expectations that he was giving you, and the silences really sort of showing the way towards what he would do later in his life. Now, I hope you'll all join us tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock. We're going to do sonatas number 6, 7, and 8. Those are kind of the meatiest of his sonatas of the middle period, all from 1802. They were actually all written in the October of 1802 while Beethoven was in this little town called Heiligenstadt, where he actually contemplated killing himself because the deafness was taking over him, and he was sort of didn't want everybody in the world to know. But that's where he decided to sort of take fate by the hand and push on to the next phase. So it's a really exciting middle period that we'll hear tomorrow. But before we do that, and again, WhiteHouseLive.tips. That's the one. If you would like to make a donation, a tip, the money goes to Whitehorse, to the Rat House Studios, to AmiciMusic, and we hope you'll help keep this music alive. It certainly has been a difficult year, but also very interesting. There's lots of good things that have come out of it in terms of live streams of this kind of music so that we can bring classical music out to more people. But we do need the help to keep this going, and it's great that Bob here at the White Horse and everybody have been able to keep this place open in a really tough time. So we're here to support them as much as we can over the next couple days. Now, this next piece is one that you may have heard. It's one of the more famous ones of his. It's known as the Spring Sonata, Sonata number 5 in F major. And it's probably the most accessible of all of Beethoven's sonatas. Just so many good tunes, and it's sort of easy listening. Not like that last one. You really had to sort of listen very carefully how things were going. This one just washes over you in beautiful melodies in all the different movements. The one interesting thing about this piece is that he actually does 4 movements of this piece, which was the first time he had done that in a sonata. 4 movements are usually reserved for symphonies, something epic like that. So Beethoven, in a sense, was saying, my sonatas are as epic as my symphonies. So listen carefully. Now, this little scherzo he does lasts all of like a minute and a half. It's a very short little thing, and it's a little joke. And in fact, those of you who know Schumann's The Soldier's March, a very famous little children's piece that Schumann wrote, is actually based upon this little scherzo. It's almost the exact same notes, but in a slightly different rhythm. And Schumann loved Beethoven. He especially loved this little movement for how creative it was, how short. It just came to the point and said everything needed. But the rest of the sonata is in more traditional form. And again, it has this very, he didn't call it the Spring Sonata, somebody else did. But it really feels quite right. It feels like it has spring about him. There's a wonderful quote by Beethoven in a letter he wrote later in life. He said, "You ask where my ideas come from. I cannot say for certain. They come uncalled, sometimes in association with other things. It seems to me that I could wrest them from nature herself with my own hands as I go walking into the woods. They come to me in the silence of the night or in the early morning, stirred into being by moods which the poet would translate into words, but which I put into sounds. And these go through my head, ringing and singing and storming, until at last I have them before me as notes." So again, this is a piece that was meant to be a companion to the one we just heard. Very beautiful opening that you might recognize. Starts with the violin theme, hands it off to the piano. Lots of Mendelssohn's Song Without Words in that. In fact, the whole second movement has a real Mendelssohn and Mozart quality to it. It doesn't even really sound so much like Beethoven. Very elegant and charming. I think Haydn would have liked this movement a lot. Then there's that kind of crazy scherzo. And finally, a fun little last movement with a little joking going back and forth as well, but always keeping in mind the melody and the spring-like quality. So I'm going to bring Tim back, who has a new and softer bow for this one. Again, hope you enjoy this. We'll see you tomorrow for part 2 at 2 o'clock. And part 3 will include the very famous Kreutzer Sonata, which is a madman's piece that will be at 2 o'clock on Sunday. But here's the Spring Sonata number 5, Opus 24 in F major.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Daniel. That was magnificent. Ludwig would have been proud of you. I know I was. Anyway, let's go out the way we came in. When the song rises up, white horses will fill the mountains. When the song rises up, then the clouds roll away. Sisters, ain't you glad to feel that fear fading? Brothers, ain't you glad there's going to be a better day? People, ain't you glad we're all in this together? People, ain't you glad that the clouds going to roll away when the song rises up? White horses fill the mountains. When the song rises up, then the clouds roll away. Well, I think the clouds are about to roll away. When the clouds roll away. Thank you very much. You know, we've had some very, what some would call intellectual, highbrow music here this evening, and I think we ought to lower the level some, even more than I just did, I think. So let me tell you, come 2 or 3 or 4 of the worst classical music jokes on record. Here's one. I was walking with a friend near the graveyard, and I suddenly hear classical music from what looks like a grave. Sounds like it's being played backwards. My friend said, "Oh, that's just Beethoven decomposing." I told you they were bad. Keep it up, you're doing fine. When I was younger, we created a boys' band of classical music. We called it the Bach Street Boys. Yep. Okay, you guys are into it, aren't you? Here's the one I like really. Why is an organ concert like a religious experience? In its playing, we sense the majesty of God. In its ending, we sense that we know His divine mercy. See? Now, I can't listen to Wagner. I keep getting the urge to conquer Poland. All right? Now, this is my real favorite one. A youngster came home from school, was having dinner with his parents and some of their friends, and his father asked him, "Son, what did you learn in school today?" And the young fellow said, "Well, we were studying classical composers, and I learned that Johann Sebastian Bach had 22 children, and he practiced on the spinster upstairs." All right, the level's been sufficiently lowered. We can go out into the world of 2021 and feel just about right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Thank you for watching. And we will hopefully see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. And good. And the thing that didn't get said was that there's a wonderful bluegrass band here, if you're into bluegrass, at 8 o'clock, called Ages Past. Anyway, thanks for being here. Take care of each other. Drive safe. Good night now.
Thanks for joining us for White Horse Live. This program is produced by White Horse Black Mountain and by Rad House Studio. Bob Hinkle is your host and executive producer. Claire Hoke is audio engineer. Jessica Wharton is director of photography. Jessica Fox is key grip and front of house engineer. Public relations services provided by Maggie Rainwater at Hoosier Devil. And I'm Rebecca Hillgraves, director and producer for these programs. We'll be back tomorrow with another great performance from White Horse Live and AmiciMusic. In the meantime, be good to each other, and that includes all people.